Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Small Firms Guide to Contract Documents webinar brought to you by AIA Contract Documents. During today's session, we're going to explore essential documents and provisions pertaining to small firms. This presentation is protected by U.S. and international copyright laws. And this program is also registered with the American Institute of Architects for continuing education. This course is eligible for one HSW learning unit. A disclaimer here, this program and accompanying materials were created for general purposes only. This is not intended to be provided as legal advice. And with that, I'm going to now turn it over to our presenter for today's session, Forrest Lott. Forrest, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Hosty. As a way of a brief introduction of who I am, I served for about 17 years on AIA's Documents Committee, and now I'm in the middle of a 6-year appointment on the Risk Management Committee for AIA. So you can say I'm somewhat of a documents junkie. But my professional experience has always been in small firms. I currently practice in a firm of just a few people working on projects that are valued from a few $100,000 to over 80 million on our largest. I know that small firms often do big projects, just as large firms often do very small projects, but they all benefit from good agreements. So the learning objectives are on screen now, and you can take a moment to read those. But we'll be taking this next hour to explore the variety of agreements and exhibits and forms and review when it is appropriate to use each option. Because there's a lot of variety within the document offerings that the AIA has, we won't be going into a lot of detail. But once you know what's available, there are plenty of resources that you can use to learn more. We'll also look at the sustainable project tools the AIA has to offer. At the conclusion, you should really be fairly well aware of the variety of contract options and sustainability tools and where to go for further assistance. All right, taking a brief overview, we've been at this a while. The AIA has been providing contracts to the construction industry for a very long time, 132 years. The drafting process has always involved member architects and stakeholders in the process. In preparing documents for the 2017 release, the Documents Committee sought comment from more than a dozen industry groups. The committee also seeks input from outside experts in property, general liability, and errors and omissions insurance, and the knowledge communities of the AIA, including technology and practice, the Committee on the Environment, small project practitioners, practice management, the Integrated Practice Discussion Group, and the Large Firm Roundtable all provide guidance to the AIA's Documents Committee and the drafting process. The committee frequently meets in person, or at least we used to, with those who submit comments so the committee can gain a full understanding of the issues being presented. All right, so we'll explore the broad categories of documents first, and then we'll get into a little more detail. The families of documents you see listed here are generally grouped by the project delivery method. You can see conventional, design, bid, build. There's design, build, construction management. Some documents like the digital practice exhibits and project forms are used across most of the families. And then the series letters, the A, B, C, reflects the parties to the agreement or other, and in some of the other series offer project guidance, forms, exhibits that are used in both agreements and sometimes as practice tools. So the numbering system can seem a little bit cryptic, and we're going to give you the keys to deciphering and decoding the AIA's numbering system in the next couple of slides here. The first alpha indicator is the series, and you can see, for example, the owner-contractor agreements are given a designator A. If you're old enough to remember the B141, you know owner-architect agreements begin with B, etc. And then there's a lot of exhibits and administrative forms that begin with G. The next character really gives you the type of agreement it is. One is a prime agreement, and we're using the example of the A201 general conditions here. So 2 is conditions and scope, and you can see the others down there. One that doesn't get enough attention, I think, is the 500 series, which are guides, which are really excellent informative tools for learning more about the documents. The next digit tells you what delivery method it is. 0, 1, and 2, the ones that have been around forever, are conventional, and then you can see construction management, design, build, etc. down the line there. Then the last digit is a sequence. The A201 general conditions is the first in that sequence, and sometimes there are more, so you'll see that. And then the last character is the year that it's issued or updated. So, what is a contract and why do we care? And do you really need one for the type of practice that you have and the type of projects that you do? We'll explore that. So what is a contract? If you ask the lawyers, they put this definition in front of you, and you can read that for yourself. For architects, it really is an agreement to provide something, usually a project, for a client in accordance with a schedule for some compensation, usually money. So why do small firms need contracts? I'm a small firm, and we know that the contract is important to make sure that we all have an understanding of the high-level major issues. What are we doing? The basis of the architect's design. Am I doing a house, a shopping center? Just what? What is the scope of the services we're providing? Are we including all our engineering or some not? How much are we getting paid? What's the compensation? Who owns the instruments of service, the drawings and specifications? And we don't want to talk about it too often, but what if things go wrong? How do we end this agreement? And I would argue that there's more here, that contracts can be an effective tool for educating clients, for establishing expectations between the parties, and for demonstrating your professionalism on the project. Don't be afraid of using them. Imagine all the paperwork your client went through just to acquire their site. We're used to contracts. If we buy a car, we sign tons of paper. Design services can certainly handle a good contract. So let's focus now on some that should be of interest to small firms. So the conventional or A201 family is the traditional design, bid, build arrangement that is still used on the majority of projects. And most of the other agreements are based on this family. It includes familiar phases of schematic, design development, construction document, followed by contract administration. And in this family, the architect provides the owner with a statement of probable construction costs and obligates to redesign if it comes in significantly lower than the owner's budget. And there's little or no involvement by prospective bidders or the successful contractor prior to the bidding phase. So here's a diagram of those relationships, and the owner, of course, is in the middle of everything. The owner contracts separately with the architect on the left and the contractor on the right. Each has their own subs, whether that's consultants or trade contractors. The owner may also have direct consultants for portions of work, maybe telecommunications, civil engineering, landscape, furnishings, that sort of thing. The architect and contractor are obligated to coordinate with these direct consultants of the owner. And between the owner and architect are listed the agreements that are based on this family, and we'll touch on those shortly. On the other side are the owner-contractor agreements that use the A201 language, the general conditions. So A201, 2017, these are the agreements listed here that are based on that general conditions. There's the A101 stipulated sum, and then two cost of the work agreements, 102 and 103, the difference being whether or not there is a guaranteed maximum price. And the owner-architect agreement that most closely matches that is the B101. It's sort of the flagship standard agreement. And it's important to recognize that most of the other agreements either add special circumstances to this core family, or they remove some phases or some level of complexity that perhaps a smaller project can do without. So it's really important to match these owner's agreements for both the architect and the contractor and view them as a match set. You don't want to be playing checkers when everybody else is playing chess. All right, so owner-architect agreements, here's sort of the listing, and the B101, which years ago was the B141, and we went through a renumbering. So if you're old enough to remember the B141, it is now the B101. And then the higher numbers have different features to them. The B102 does not have a predefined scope of services. It's just the terms and conditions. And we'll discuss later how you make that a complete contract. The B103 is for a more complex project. It has a bigger team. For example, you might have an independent estimator rather than the architect doing cost projections. The B104 is an abbreviated form. It has three phases: design, construction documents, and then the construction phase. Even shorter is the B105, which just has two phases: design it, build it. A few others worth mentioning. We said earlier that the contract is, and what the architect provides is usually for money. The B106 is for pro bono services. Even if you're not being paid for services, there are probably some issues that need to be memorialized in an agreement to either limit your liability, protect your design services, or issues like that. B107 is for a prototype single family house where you might expect the developer to repeat that someplace else. And as you can imagine, the compensation structure for that might need to be different. B108, we partnered with the federal government to customize an agreement for a federally funded or federally insured project. So all of their requirements are in there at the beginning. And then the B109 is multifamily residential, I'd say, and or mixed use residential project. A lot of multifamily also often has some portions of the project that are not strictly residential, but that's an agreement tailored to that. So how do you choose which one? And this diagram is intended to give you a little bit of guidance. There's a length to the document, and there's a complexity to the document. And you can see that on the scale. The B101, A101 is kind of that standard. It has all the sort of bells and whistles in that. The 104 is written to pair with the A104. The 105 pairs with the A105, and this is that you don't want to be playing checkers when they're playing chess things. So you want to make sure that your documents with the owner are matched in complexity and risk to the ones that the owner is using with the contractor. It's true that we've made AIA documents really easy to edit, but if you start out with a document that most closely matches your objectives, your project parameters, you'll find you can shorten the time it takes to get that agreement just right. Master agreements. These are relatively new in the AIA documents table, but I think they're very flexible, and I've found that they really provide a small firm with a powerful tool to building a relationship with an owner that they work with repeatedly. So here's a listing of them. They've been very popular. As I said, they're helpful if you've got repeat business. The difference between a work order and a service order is important to understand. They're both task orders, but AIA contract documents view architectural stuff that we do as a service and the stuff that the contractor performs as work. So if you keep in mind, architects provide service, contractors do work, that'll help you. Also, the alpha indicator, the A is an owner contractor form or agreement, and the B is for owner architect, and then the C is between the architect and their consultant. So after these first came out, the need for sub-agreements was identified, and here's a listing of those. If it is a contractor owner task order agreement or whatever, you can use these 421, 422 to have an agreement between the contractor and the subcontractor, and then a work order under that agreement, perhaps multiple work orders that define what it is that the subcontractor is doing for the contractor. And this is a very flexible family. You can have the architect under a traditional sort of design agreement, but the contractor may be hired by someone that in an arrangement that they work repeatedly with, using the master agreement and work orders, or it could be the reverse. So these are tools where the entities do often similar work repeatedly. So what is in the master agreement? The main point of the master agreement is to establish all of the non-scope, non-compensation terms so that they don't have to be renegotiated for every new project. Things like dispute resolution, termination, use of the instruments of service, those will remain the same on project after project and can be part of the master agreement. This allows the parties to agree on the scope and compensation in the task order and get on with the project in a much quicker fashion. So if you've got the master agreement in place with all those universal terms, it becomes a contract when you couple it with one of these either service orders or work orders. An example might be a hospital where an architect has a master agreement to help the hospital do multiple small projects in a year, often renovations. We've had quite a bit of that kind of work. Another example might be if you're doing Popeye's fried chickens. I've done this presentation with a friend from New Orleans, and he says that's a great example. So if a builder is building the same project repeatedly, he may get all the terms and conditions under the agreement and then just do a new work order for each example that he's building. So keep in mind that while they establish common terms, they don't take effect until the work or service order is executed. The agreement just sits there waiting for the order to be executed, and then once the order is agreed to between the parties, you've then created a contract and you're bound by the terms of the master agreement that you likely executed in advance. But each executed task order with the agreement stands as its own contract. And that's an important distinction. These are ways to create multiple small contracts. All right, let's move on and look at an entirely different thing, residential design build. A lot of small firms build or work collaboratively with a construction entity on residential projects, and there's an agreement for that. So graphically, this is much simpler than the one we looked at earlier. It has an A designation because there is construction involved. So there is an owner-builder agreement, and within that design-build entity, you're getting both functions of design and construction. So it's a very simple arrangement. So key features of it. It was specifically developed for residential design build. I worked on the group that drafted this, and we had a number of people very active in this market helping us. It's a relatively short form, 15 pages, and there's a single exhibit, and that's the design build amendment. So let's look at the process here next. So in the beginning, the basic steps go like this. The owner's criteria is established. That may take many forms, including initial information about the site, the owner's description of the house they want to build, sketches, photographs of example houses that the owner likes. It can be anything. But from that basket of information, the owner's criteria, the design process begins and continues on until you get a design build amendment. And that document includes the more traditional drawings, assumptions, allowances, unit prices, and the contract sum. And the approved design build amendment sends the project into the construction phase. A little warning, it's in red here. Residential construction may be highly regulated in your jurisdiction. Unlike commercial construction, where a relatively savvy client is assumed, the residential client may have rarely, if ever, been involved in a construction contract before this enterprise. To protect residential consumers, many jurisdictions have very specific requirements and protections in place, and it's important that you know what those are. Examples, of course, lien rights and warranties. And the agreement has a field point to record these jurisdictional requirements, but a standard form agreement like this can't do the homework for you. So if you contemplate using this agreement, you need to find out what are the specific requirements and laws that govern residential design in your specific jurisdiction. All right, so we're going to look now at the B102. If you remember, the B101 is sort of the flagship document that a lot of the other documents are based on, but the 102 takes that and somewhat like the task order standard form or document we discussed, splits it into the agreement and the services. So why would you use a two-part model? You get to take the B102 agreement and put in a scope of service document that is specific to the services you intend to provide, and then they form a complete owner-architect agreement. And there's a whole list of these scopes, and we'll touch on those. But this deals with the scope of services of the architect. So the B102 has some tables and articles that you should be familiar with. The full title of the document is without a predefined scope of services, but it gets a defined scope of services as you begin to put this into use. And you'll notice that in this 9 table of articles here, there's no design and there's no contract administration. So you couple that B102 and on the left with any of these on the right that are appropriate. If you choose the top one, the B201, the design and construction contract administration, you essentially have a B101. You just put it back together. But you can see some of these other values here. And because the B102 is an agreement without a predefined scope of service, it can be paired with any of these. or you can create a custom scope of services and then couple it with this document. So if we have within the document offerings a B101, a one part that has a 102 and the 201 design and construction administration here, why have both options? And we have it because we recognize that you may begin a project coupling this with a B202 programming or site evaluation or something else, regional or urban planning, and then it may lead into design and construction contract administration. Well, then you can add the B201 to a document you already have in place and not start completely over. It's really a good tool for beginning a project with very specialized services like programming, site evaluation if they don't have a site already, and then bolting on whatever additional scopes are required. All right, well, let's delve into sustainable projects a little bit. And they are sustainable objectives are pretty much a conversation on most projects that we deal with nowadays, and the AIA has been growing a nice group of resources to help in that. So a little bit about the history of how sustainable projects have been addressed in the past. In 2007, there was a very short clause in B101 about addressing sustainability in the project. Basically, a little requirement that says, y'all get together and talk about it. Because of the increase in the number and scope of sustainable projects, the Sustainable Projects Guide was developed. It discussed the concepts regarding the relationship of how project agreements should be modified to reflect the relative risks and rewards that are unique to the way sustainable projects are designed, constructed, and operated. Later, the concepts and clauses in the guide were actually incorporated in agreements and issued as a full family of SP or sustainable project documents. Then, 2017, we took a slightly different approach. The contract issues that should be addressed for sustainable projects are all included in one exhibit that gets attached to each agreement for the project. By making it an exhibit, the language is all in one place. It's not separated out and interspersed through each of the separate agreements. And when the language was in separate documents, it was possible to make edits or changes in only one document and to lose the coordination between the full family of documents. You don't want to have one set of requirements for the architect who's relying on the contractor to do something, and then the contract is silent on their obligation to do that. So the SP exhibit was formed to help address that. So the exhibit includes all the things that you see listed here. It includes definitions that are necessary for this special set of project parameters, sustainable objective, what is it we're trying to get to, what are we going to do, how shall we measure it. This all becomes documented in a sustainability plan that roadmaps how we're going to achieve these objectives and how we're going to measure them. And then what sustainability certification will be sought, what kind of documentation is needed for it, and who's going to be the entity that tells us whether we achieved our objective or not. So in the architect's scope, what they do in the project exhibit covers the scope required of each of the three major contracting parties, the architect, the contractor, and the owner. The architect is required to conduct a workshop, quote, as soon as practicable, but not later than the conclusion of schematic design phase services with the owner, the owner's consultants, and the architect's consultants. So basically the design and ownership team gets together and they conduct this workshop, and it's a requirement that it be done early because the longer in the design process, the more difficult it is, of course, to incorporate the sustainable measures into the project. During the workshop, the participants will review and discuss the potential sustainability certifications. Are we going after LEED Gold or some other certification? Then you'll establish the sustainable objectives that are appropriate to this particular project. And they vary by project type, scale, and site. You'll discuss the potential sustainable measures and examine strategies for implementing the sustainable measures, and discuss the potential impact of the sustainable measures on the project schedule, the owner's program, and the owner's budget for the cost of the work. So it is really almost like a separate design effort to make sure that all the sustainable objectives that are sought are balanced with schedule and budget and the owner's needs and desires. And then lastly, following the sustainability of the workshop, the architect prepares a sustainability plan based on the sustainable objectives and the targeted sustainable measures. So this is what we're going to do and how we're going to measure whether we got there. So moving on to the contract and the owner's scope, the architect would then prepare schematic, design development, and CDs that incorporate the sustainable measures identified in the sustainability plan as appropriate. And then during the construction phase, the architect services include attention to how the sustainable measures are being constructed and achieved, a reviewing of proposed changes to the work and their potential impact on the sustainable measures and the sustainable objectives. And then lastly, forwarding to the owner all the documentation collected regarding the sustainability effort, including that documentation that's required for the certifying authority. And then finally, the architect registers the project with the certifying authority, gathers all of the required submittal information, and gets it properly submitted. All right, digital practice documents. I had an opportunity to work on these, and I have found them to be very helpful. They're good tools for aiding the project, as well as understanding the impact of working in a digital environment compared to the way some of us used to do things. If you look on the left, you see the agreement and the E203. The E, if you look back at what the letters mean, E signifies that this is an exhibit to the agreement. If you went back again, the 2 suggests that it's part of the traditional family, and then 3 is a series number again. So if you got on the left an AIA B101, a typical owner architect agreement, you would add to that the E203. And the E203 is a high-level document that basically sets out our agreement. This is how we're going to manage digital data on the project. We're going to do building information modeling, or we're not. The architect's going to maintain a project website for the benefit of the project through the conclusion of construction documents, and then the contractor will take over the digital management of project information after that. All those sorts of high-level decisions, mostly that can affect the party's time and cost, are memorialized in the 203. And the 203 also requires that the parties follow the protocols once established. If you don't have the 203, there's no obligation to follow what you agreed we were going to do, and you need the protocols to define, for example, what a building information model can and cannot be used for. The E203 sets that broad framework of how the parties intend to use digital information, whether BIM is going to be shared between the parties, or whether the building information model is going to be used by the design team alone, or whether you're not planning on providing, using, or sharing BIM. Also, email, project websites, and participant responsibilities can be agreed and documented. The E203 is designed to be a flow-down document, so all the other participants in the project have an obligation to have their sub-agreements incorporate the same, because it includes limitations of liability and restrictions on the use of some digital data. And the protocols, the G201 and G202, get into the specifics of how the digital information is created and shared. So with the exhibit, the E203, you have these articles, the general provisions. It talks about how we will transmit and who owns the digital data that's being shared. And 3, it establishes the protocols that we'll use for normal digital data. And this is outside of the building information modeling. Or we're going to maintain a project-centric website where all digital data goes, or is everybody just going to be using Outlook or whatever the option may be. And then Article 4 defines how building information will be used or not used, and who will have access to the model for what particular purposes. And then 5 gives you an opportunity to record any special terms and conditions related to the digital data, whether it's building information modeling or not. And this sets out that if unauthorized use occurs, for example, if a contractor has a subcontractor who uses digital data inappropriately and wants to claim that there's a higher level of information there than these documents said, then that party who shared it with their sub is responsible for that unauthorized use or reliance on digital data. So it really sets the ground rules for creating and sharing digital data among the project participants. So the 201 is for all that digital data other than building information modeling. A project can benefit from this form even if BIM's not being used. It's a pretty rare project nowadays that doesn't use some form of digital communication and data sharing. When data is shared, someone needs to be responsible for establishing a shared site. Someone needs to maintain and protect the data and provide archiving and storage of that data so that it is available for when the parties truly need it. This is the tool to record all of those responsibilities when an ad hoc approach just won't cut it. All right, the G202, this is the modeling protocol document. When you look at it, it is largely a long matrix, but it provides a way to memorialize what is going to be digitally modeled, when it's going to be modeled, to what level of development, and for what purpose the modeled data can be relied on. On a table in G202, use a CSI format to break down all the building components from top to bottom, and then you have milestones across the top of the article. And so you can determine in advance how much you're going to model each CSI level group of information. And it really appears kind of daunting at first. And the first time you fill one out, it really makes you think. But once you've decided for your firm, this is the way we do things, it really becomes a useful way of looking at your building information modeling data and how you would share it. So let's talk a little bit now. We've kind of touched on all the high level content now, and we can talk a little bit about how to bring all of these different kinds of documents together, access the data. The AIA has a tremendous amount, and we've had a very quick high-level overview of this. There's a ton of information available on the AIA's website. Knowing that these documents exist is the first step. You can look at free samples of these. You can explore a lot of information about it. The 500 series of documents has guides that are a lot of help. The software is extremely helpful in modifying it. And so Now, let me turn it back to Hasti, and she can tell you about kitting and using these.
Thank you very much, Forrest. So as Forrest mentioned, I will spend the remainder of our session today talking about how you can purchase and use AIA contract documents in the online service. We'll also close with resources available for you on our website and elsewhere that'll help you as you get acclimated to using AIA contract documents or just need a refresher. Lastly, we'll answer any questions, time permitting, and I think we should have some time. So enter any questions in the chat that you have. We'll get to as many as we possibly can. And to those we can't get to, we'll have you forward them along to the docinfo@aia.org. So starting off with your options on how to access AIA contract documents. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different formats available, different subscription models that we have and what they entail, how much they cost, where and how you can purchase, and where the resources are. So our model is one of three that you have to access AIA contract documents all through our website. And I'll go over our purchase page in a moment. But you can purchase a basic single document, a custom single document, or an unlimited annual subscription. So we'll start with the basic single document. This option allows you only to enter fill points. So any project-specific information you can edit, but you can't edit any of the provisions or the body of the contract. The cost point here is $29.99 for agreements and $9.99 for forms. This might be a good option for those basic forms that you might need, again, where you just enter project data or edit project data and date information and that sort of thing, but don't need to actually edit the body of the form. For editing documents, whether they're forms or agreements, you would purchase a custom single document. And you can do this purchase all on our website as well. For agreements, the price ranges $64.99 to $84.99. AIA members do receive a discount. So just dependent on the agreement or form you choose, you'll see the pricing listed on the page. Forms are $29.99. Here you are able to not only enter project data, but you can edit the documents in their entirety. So any provisions that you want to edit, or if you want to remove a provision or add a provision, you're able to do so. You can download the documents in a Microsoft Word file and make all of your edits in Microsoft. So this is a totally customizable, editable document. And this is a good option for smaller firms that might not know how many contracts they need per year. Maybe they only need a few. You're able to create an account in the online service, make purchases with initially on our website, but then make purchases within the online service itself. And you can just pay as you go, purchase documents as you need, and all of your information is still saved within the online service within your account. If you see that you do need more access to greater quantity of documents or all of the AIA contract documents that are in our library, you can purchase an annual unlimited subscription. This again gives you access to all of the templates, all of the agreements and forms within our library. You can make as many drafts or finals as you like. For the custom single document, you're purchasing per agreement. So once you finalize that agreement, you have made your purchase. If you need that document again later, you'll have to purchase it again. For the unlimited subscription, you have unlimited access. So you can make as many finals of the same document or just use as many as you'd like and access all of them. AIA members for the year right now is $1,000.39.99. And for non-AIA members for an annual unlimited subscription, it's $12.99.99. To learn more and to purchase, you can visit our website. So here's a screenshot of aiacontracts.org. You can see that there's a purchase tab here. And when you click on that purchase page, this is where you're going to go to. Also, you can directly go to aiacontracts.org/purchase. And you see each of what I just detailed listed here, the basic single document, custom single, and unlimited access. You can check prices on documents individually here or see the pricing for the unlimited access. And we have multiple seats for unlimited access. So if you need 1 or 2 seats in your firm or 3, we go anywhere from 1 seat to 50 plus for larger firms. But for small firms, if you just have 1 or 2 people in the company that need access, you can make that purchase. And you can adjust the pricing based on the number of seats that you need. One thing I do want to plug here is that for all, and this is for new customers typically sign up, but if you have been using the online service for a while and never received formal training, or if you're thinking of making a purchase or purchasing an unlimited annual subscription or a single document, this is a great basics training that goes through all of the features of the online service, how you can access and edit and finalize documents, how you can create project manuals and other wonderful things that are within the system. Again, it's a 1-hour free online training. You'll be receiving this PowerPoint by email tomorrow, the PDF version. So you can just click on this link here to be taken to the available dates. We do this training weekly, so you can sign up and receive a demo of the online service, or again, if you've never received formal training or you need a refresher, great training to just show you how exactly to use the online service to its full capabilities. I'm going to talk now about contact and resources before we move on to answer any questions that you have. So there is a guide to AIA contract documents for small projects. It is free, as all of our guides are. We highly recommend, again, it's hyperlinked within this PowerPoint presentation, and you'll be receiving the handout tomorrow via email. So great resource, free guide. It'll talk all about our documents and important resources for small firms and sole practitioners, as well as custom residential architects. So highly recommend that you access that. We also wanted to talk about what's new, what's coming, what's happened in 2020 that's applicable to small firms. As you can see, we've got a few documents listed here. The B106, owner and architect for pro bono services. The B107, developer, builder, and architect for prototypes for a 1 or 2 family residential project here, as well as the B109, owner and architect for multifamily residential or mixed-use residential project. Now, I've hyperlinked to a webinar that we had on these documents. So there is a 1-hour free webinar that talks in detail about these documents. It's available on our YouTube channel, but you can also link to it from or access it from this PowerPoint. Highly recommend, if you're interested in these documents or plan on using them, to attend that webinar to learn more. So for resources and contact, here we do have a Learn section on our website. So if you go to aiacontracts.org, there is a Learn tab. All of our education is available there. And we also have a help page. Help is where you can enter any FAQ questions that you have, and you can see a full listing of all of our resources, articles, webinars, and any answers to your questions that are there. I'd like to also plug our YouTube channel. We have a large number of on-demand webinars there available, as well as we have video series and other recordings that are available to you either on the content of AIA contract documents or on the product itself. So I highly recommend that you subscribe to the YouTube channel and also click the bell notification icon. That way you can be notified of when we add a new offering. Typically, we'll add videos every week. So great resource, free resource available for you to learn, not just about AIA contract documents, but about various legal considerations and COVID-related considerations that affect the industry. So very good resource there. Any questions that we don't get to today, please, and anytime you have a content-related question in the future, please send them over to docinfo@aia.org. This is our service for content. Our colleague Ben Siegel mans this line and is very knowledgeable with the contract documents. If he can't answer your question, he will forward it on to one of our staff attorneys to get back to you. We don't provide legal advice, but we absolutely can help you with any questions you have regarding contract documents and what documents we have available. You can reach him also at 202-626-7526. Any questions you have about the online service, or if you need technical support, you can contact tech support at aia.org, telephone 1-800-942-7732. So now I'm going to go ahead and open it up for any questions. I did see a few come in through the chat, so we do have about 10 minutes to go over some questions. And again, just keep in mind that you will receive the PowerPoint and recording from today's session by tomorrow. I do see a lot of questions about the PowerPoint. Yes, you will be receiving it tomorrow, so keep that in mind. Also, if you entered your AIA member ID when you registered, your credit will be reported to the AIA by the end of the week. So, Forrest, here's a question for you. Please describe proper language to have the contractor being pre-selected and completely responsible for cost estimating.
Good question. We've got a variety of different contract or agreement forms. The baseline B101 will have the architect responsible for the statement of probable construction cost. And in fact, there's an obligation in that agreement. If it doesn't come in close enough to the budget, the architect may be obligated to redesign to bring it back into budget. But in both larger, more complex projects and smaller projects, it might not be appropriate for the architect to be the one to provide those estimates. In smaller ones, it's often appropriate that the architect not do that, that the contractor provide that costing information. And if you look at the B104, 105, you can see options for that. In the more complex projects, where you have more participants in the project, there's often an independent cost estimator that is part of the project team. So who does the costing is one of the things that varies along the scale of the project. And you can just examine the different agreements to see which one fits. And in small projects, it's highly normal that the architect does not do a formal cost estimate. Hosty was mentioning some of the resources. Just to remind everyone, if you go to the documents website, you can look at any of these contracts we've talked about and download essentially a locked PDF that will let you look at the language, and that can be very helpful for determining whether this project agreement responds to your needs or not.
That's a great point, Forrest. So yes, if you go to our website, you can enter the document number, let's say A201, and it'll pull up the document page that not only has a sample preview, it's a locked PDF, as Forrest mentioned, but it also has the associated education or articles or guides that mention that document listed there. So you get a little preview of the document as well as a paragraph description, but you'll also get resources for continued learning if you want to learn more about that document and how to use it.
And if you're still stumped, you can call Ben at docinfo and he'll help you through it.
Exactly. So what happens to the AIA owner-architect agreement when the contractor uses their own contract? This happens a lot in small residential construction.
Well, let me start by answering that from the baseline document. If you're using a B101, that agreement between the architect and the owner includes language that says the architect's services during the construction phase are those services as described in the A201. So if you're starting with an AIA agreement, it will, with your agreement with the owner, will describe your role and services with the owner during the construction phase. If the owner enters into an agreement with a contractor that alters your assumed services, then you need to have that discussion with them and either adjust the party's services to be in sync, or you're entitled to an adjustment in your contract. And that language is in the B document, the owner architect agreement, for just this purpose. So if the owner agrees to a different set of architect's services during construction with the contractor, then you were assuming when you entered into the project with the owner, then there's a mechanism to get that sorted out through a change in services.
Great. One inquiry came in. I have been using B105 for all small and residential projects. Any reason I would use something else?
That's a great question. I've given this same seminar with a colleague of mine who has a custom residential practice in the Louisiana area, and he won't use anything but a full-fledged B101 agreement because he has he provides his services using that full agreement and has considered the 104 and 105, which, if you remember, has more limited design phase services. The construction agreements that pair with them on the contract side are more limited. If the document's going to be shorter, it's got to leave stuff out. And he has found that the full B101 offers him an opportunity to professionally sit down and discuss with his client the services he's going to provide, the complexity of those level of services, the value of those services. And he uses the B101, the big contract, as a way to enhance his service to his clients and to increase their perception of his value. And I applaud him for that and pretty much do the same in our practice. We pull out the 104 and 105 when the project is with a client that we've worked with a good bit before, who is working with a contractor that we have a good relationship with, and we think the complexity of the project is fairly low. Once you get comfortable using the sort of the full meal deal, and you realize what a great teaching tool it can be for your client as well as your staff, all of the language that's in there is in there for a reason, and you need to carefully consider what language you're willing to do without and when you use the shorter form agreements.
Great. And here's a question I can answer. If you purchase a single copy custom document, can it be modified or scope adjusted later in the project process? Is that possible without additional cost? So the way the custom single document works is you purchase that custom single document and you access it in the online service. You have all of the features available to an unlimited annual subscriber. The main difference is that while you can generate as many drafts and as many versions of the draft as you'd like, once you generate a final, and you do need to generate a final once the final contract is a locked PDF. So once you generate the final, no changes can be made to that document at all. That's when your cost is covered. So if for whatever reason you did have to go back and make any alterations after you generated the final, you would have to purchase the document again. So that is a very important distinction for the custom single document. Once you generate the final, it is the final copy. In the unlimited annual subscription, you don't have that limitation. You can generate as many finals for the year as you'd like at any time. I think we have, we're right at the 4 o'clock hour. There are a lot of questions in the chat, so we could not get to a lot today. I do highly recommend, if you have any questions we couldn't get into today, please email docinfo@aia.org. Ben is a great resource and he can answer your questions there. I want to thank Forrest for preparing for this presentation. I want to thank all of the attendees for joining us today. We hope you found this helpful. With that, thank you all very much.